Did your mother turn you against one another? My mother, I feel you right there, pitted me and my four sisters against one another. Oh, yeah, this is a big yes. It took me years to figure out what was going on. In childhood, I had no idea. I knew there was this weird thing going on, but it was my normal. And I hear this actually a lot from survivors where they say, like, I knew that something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. That's a great podcast, by the way. If you guys haven't seen it, I get nothing from this other than sharing something that's really great. Something Was Wrong is the name of the podcast, and it has a lot of features of narcissistic abuse, particularly in romantic relationships. Anyway, getting back to your question, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what, other than there was something wrong with me. That I knew for sure, because even if I were to start to think that it wasn't me, my mother let me know very, very overtly, not just by the way she was treating me, that there was something wrong with me and that everybody knew it. Things like, you're sick in the head, everybody knows it, and they can't understand why I keep you around and why I don't send you to the, sicko hospital. She had all sorts of names for psych wards. She would tell me that everybody knows I'm damaged goods and that I'm a tramp. And incidentally, when she was telling me these things, aside from the way that she was treating me and exposing me to CSA, I was 9. I was 9. Sometimes, I think about it and I'm like, I was 9. I wasn't older than that. Tramp started at the age of 9 for sure. Damaged goods at the age of 9 for sure. And everybody knows I was sick in the head. That might have started at the age of 10, because I think it was in response to one of the times that I ran away. And I know it was in response because the script is on repeat to a time where I had a little alone time with my ex-favorite aunt. And my mother told me that she knew I talked about me, which I didn't, but I, of course, thought I must have because my mother said so. And she told me nobody was going to believe me because, and especially not that aunt, because they all know that I'm sick in the head and that there's something wrong with me, and that they've told her multiple times that at least she should send me to a shrink. Thinking about that now, I realize that my favorite aunt was probably telling her that I needed to go and see a psychologist because of all the trauma I had been through. So my mother was, I know now, taking factual information and spinning it so that if she was actually somehow pressured or forced to take me to a shrink, which did happen when I was 17 years old, that I would have a feeling about it that there was something wrong with me and that it wasn't a positive thing that I was there. Anyway, we'll get to let's get to my mother's son, my half brother, my mother's son. He's not my brother, which is not his fault in childhood. It's definitely something that he is accountable for now, because I'm 59 and he's 5.5 years older. He's raised a family. He has children. I don't know if he has grandchildren at this point. He's been married forever. He's lived enough in contrast in the adult world that he has no excuses anymore, at least from my point of view. The games I know that my mother played between myself and my brother, an interesting little fact, my brother has told me, throughout our childhood and at some point in one of our very last conversations, and I'm talking, I was probably 20 in one of our last actual conversations, that I was always my mother's favorite. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't she drop you out of the 2-story window then? Because I don't know that she tried to unalive you. I don't know that she didn't, but I do know she tried to unalive me. And I'm thinking, if I was her favorite, what were you going through? Such a bizarre statement to this day. I cannot wrap my head around it, other than how my mother would probably make me look like the golden child to my brother, and she absolutely did the opposite to me as well, made me think he was the golden child. Now, that golden child, even when he was crashing cars, I don't fault him for this. He was a 16-year-old kid with sports cars. He had no business behind the wheels of a sports car. And he totals one and gets another, totals one, gets another. He went through a Camaro, a Firebird, a Trans Am, and he also crashed our stepfather's Cadillac as well. So, after that one, he got sent to Montreal somehow. Anyway, going backwards, how my mother would divide us. I think it's important to mention that my mother avoided abusing me in front of my brother and vice versa. Looking backwards as adults, I'm sure that both of us can look at certain situations and go, kind of thing. Like my mother screaming and yelling at him and hitting him on the back and like flying into a rage the day that she dropped me out of the 2-story window. I saw her attack him. That was the only time I can remember her actually screaming, yelling at him in front of me and attacking him. The flip side of that, the way that she dropped me out of the 2-story window, I don't know that he would have recognized that that's what she did. I do know he would have lied for her because he was groomed at 5.5 years older than I was, so I was about 6 at the time, to be her husband, her boyfriend, her protector, her everything. And that's not his fault, obviously. The lie she would have had him protect, and I don't think he would have told it. I think he just wouldn't have disclosed what he actually saw. And this was something that she did to him a lot throughout our childhood. I can remember situations, particularly the one where I believe she had something to do with the death of my stepfather. My brother covered for her and does until this day. That's why he doesn't get any free passes anymore. The day of dropping me out of the 2-story window, the story that she spun for the family was that I was playing on a toy box that was underneath that window that she had told me multiple times not to play on. Is anybody asking why she didn't move the toy box? Is anybody out there asking why would there be a toy box underneath a window that a child could fall out of? Guess what? Drum roll. Spoiler alert, there was no toy box. My mother dangled me out the window and let go of me. And my brother would have been behind her, I think, in the room. And that's why he probably doesn't realize that that's what she did. Or if he does, it is something he just can't look at. And I get that part of it because you know what? Until about 2 years ago, I never connected the dots that she was trying to unalive me that day. I never thought about it in that way because I walked away with 2 broken arms, and it was just too painful to accept the fact that my own mother would actually intentionally try to unalive me. But clearly that's what she was doing. So getting back to stories of how my mother, well, I'll just give you one that is a thing she would do often with different objects. When my brother was in his early to late teens, so I would say I would have been 10, so he would have been 13, 14 years old, up until he ended up living in Montreal after crashing all the cars that he totaled and all that sort of stuff. My mother had a crystal ashtray on her nightstand that was filled with pills. Uppers, downers, for those of you from my generation, Quaaludes and Black Beauties, that sort of thing. And my mother would leave those there out in the open, knowing that my brother, who's a kid, was smoking weed and hash and taking Quaaludes at a minimum. I don't know if he was taking the uppers, but I certainly know for a fact that he was taking the Quaaludes because sometimes I was with him when he was doing that, him and his friends. So I know that that's like something I saw, something I witnessed. There's no question about it. Never once did I ever tell on my brother for anything he ever did. I protected him to the ends of the earth because I knew what my mother's wrath looked like. And because he was my big brother, and as far as I was concerned as a little girl, he hung the moon. He was everything to me. So my mother would go into her room and then come out like in a huff when my brother wasn't home and stick her head in my door and say, did so-and-so, I don't want to name him, go into my room? And I'd be like, no, whether he did or didn't. And usually he didn't. But I don't know for a fact that he didn't. You know what I mean? Like when I was home, I didn't notice him go in. I don't think he went in. I think she was doing to him what she liked to do to me. What did she like to do to me? Go into my closet, wrinkle a shirt over, go into a rage, rip apart my closet. So I'm thinking that maybe she was just in a mood and wanted to have a go at him and needed to make something up like she did with me. Anyway, I would say no, or I would say I don't know, or I would say I know, or I would say no. You know, I'd go back and forth, you know, kind of one of these, because I'm scared that I'm going to give her the wrong answer. And at the same time, there's no way in hell I'm going to throw him under the bus. And what's funny about that, by the way, is that there were times, I'm just thinking about it, when my brother would come to me and ask me if my mother went into his room, because he always had, like, well, not always, but oftentimes had a stash of pot hidden in his closet. And I would say no and protect her exactly the same way I would protect him. More times than not, I actually saw her go into his room, but not the other way around. And I was just, you know, in full survival mode of protecting them, I guess, from each other and protecting myself from whatever might come next, which I actually never saw. So there's that. Anywho, my brother would get home and I would kind of hear my mother talking to him a little bit, and then nothing would happen. And then I would think, okay, you know, everything's good, everything's fine. Eventually, probably, usually, most of the time, days later, my brother would come to me, why did you tell mommy, and that's what he calls her to this day, that I went in her room? And I was like, I didn't. I don't believe you. Everybody knows. You're a liar. And at the time, I didn't recognize what he meant. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't put together why he didn't believe me. I always protected him. And then I realized years later, after a conversation that I had with him when I was in my early 20s, and this is how deep the division and the brainwashing had taken hold. I called my brother, and I mean, I must have been 21, maybe 22, really early 20s. And I disclosed to him that when I was 12 years old, the time I ran away from home and stayed out all night wasn't my choice. That time when I ran, and that was actually the first time that I ended up out all night, I got in a car with someone. It's a much longer story than this. And I was essayed. That's actually how I lost my virginity. I didn't even know that I was a virgin. I didn't know what that word meant at that time. I didn't know what that word meant for probably a good, I don't know, year and a half late, like a year and a half after that. That's when I came to know that word. Before that, I had no idea what had happened, only that, you know, it hurt and all these different things. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. I'm just going to share with you the part that's was connected to my brother. There's other videos where I do talk about that. So it's not like I don't want to talk about it. I'm just not wanting to make that a part of this video when I rather answer the targeted question. So my brother, throughout that conversation, the only thing he said to me throughout that conversation, you're a liar. You're a liar. You're a liar. You've always been a liar. Everybody knows you're a liar. You're a liar. You're a liar. You're lying. You're lying. You're lying. Throughout the whole conversation. And I was like, what? And he was the only person in my entire family that I was in contact with at that time, by the way, that I had ever trusted with that I had ever told. And I looked up to him so much as his little sister that I was sure he was going to support me. I never imagined he wouldn't believe me. But see, when you have a mother who is a narcissistic abuser, they work overtime to poison everybody against their main victim, what we call the black sheep or the scapegoat. Because if nobody is on that child's side, they have free reign and access to do whatever it is they want to do, and they feel safe and righteous doing so. That's why the siblings get divided. Because if one sibling starts to develop empathy for the one who's being abused and think that's wrong, the abuser might be, exposed, maybe even by that sibling, or that sibling might come to the defense of the one being abused and go against the parent, in my case, my mother. And so narcissistic abusers very systematically, with intention, divide and conquer the siblings. And they also damage the development of their cognitive empathy for one another. They teach the siblings in the family who they are as individuals, what their role to play is, whether it's golden child, kind of non-existent child, scapegoat child, secondary golden child, depends on how many siblings there are. They teach them what their role is and who they are, and how to be in the favor of the abuser themselves. So in other words, these children realize pretty quickly, pretty early on, that if they are too associated with the bad or scapegoat child, they might become that too. And that if they align with the abuser, in my case, my mother, they have kind of a free pass and some safety in that. The other thing that happens in that family dynamic is each child is aware of who the other child is. So for example, like in my practice, I have some family members. I also do family practice. So I have individual survivors of narcissistic abuse. I have survivors of narcissistic abuse that come from the same family system. And while I don't typically end up doing therapy with the family, I do oftentimes have several members of the same family. And I will hear different siblings describe each other as, well, yeah, that one was always really sensitive and kind of weak. And that one, yeah, she was the tough one and kind of strong kind of thing. And what that is the definition of their siblings that they learned through their parents' labeling. So I hope this video is helpful for you, because I want to validate for you, yes, it's a thing. And moreover, for anyone out there who's going through the confusion of, why didn't my siblings stand with me? And the answer is they didn't get the same parental experience. That's why. And they were also taught who you are and that they're not supposed to. And undoing that conditioning, especially when they have a huge enmeshment with the abusive parent, is, well, it very rarely happens. Very, very rarely happens. And you never had them in the first place to lose, even though I know that it feels like a really deep loss. I mourned the loss of my brother for decades. I also lived in the fantasy that when my mother dies, I will get him as my brother. Like, I thought when his fear of her is what kept him from me. I thought that for a long time. And I dreamt of the day. I would daydream about the day that when she dies, he'll call me and go, I'm so sorry, you're my sister, and welcome me into the family, and all of those sorts of things. And what I've come to realize is that even if that were to happen, I don't want him. He doesn't deserve me. All the time that he left me abandoned, knowing that my mother is rotten to her core, because he does know. Regardless of what he needs from her, he does know that. And I mean, she's a convicted criminal as recently as 2014, and he's very aware of that. And he still looks at me like the family liar and stands with her. So it's just gotten to a point of so many betrayals that there's nothing that I would want to build with him, because I have no respect for him. And I have an immeasurable amount of respect for myself and love for myself. So I just wouldn't subject myself to that at this point in my life. And I'm glad I don't have that fantasy anymore. It's sad that my mother destroyed our relationship before it had a chance to be anything like it was supposed to be. The selfishness of that, I mean, I'm a mom, and the thought of my kids when I'm gone not having one another would destroy me. I find that just so heartbreaking. And I find it very comforting to know that one day when I pass and when their dad passes, they will have one another. That's how it's supposed to be. But not if you're a piece of garbage like my mother.